Okay, thank you for the warm welcome. Just start off acknowledging the country, Wurundjeri peoples of the Kulin Nations, who are traditional owners of the land that we're meeting on today. I'm among friends here, lots of familiar faces, which is good. And everyone who knows me will know I'm boring for Britain. I do realise that this is the last session. I'm all that's standing between you guys and drinks. So you'll have to tell me to stop when you've had enough. But starting off with the title, what's the product in academic publishing, or why people in the open access debate are all talking about different things. A nice long title, because you've got to start off the way you intend to go on. This is just bringing together, as was just said, I have a degree in business, studied management and economics and marketing, and so trying to apply some of that thinking to the work we do day to day in libraries, or what we're trying to do in the academic publishing world, bringing those two things that I've studied together. Hopefully it's a useful insight. Like Stephen said before, mostly more about asking good questions than actually coming up with solutions, but hopefully there's some insight that's useful for further discussions with both publishers and libraries and everyone else involved. There's the hashtag, as was said, it's in the app, VALA 2020 session 7, so that I can afterwards go and read all the nice things you've said about me. Just to set the scene, so the one of the conference themes in the call for submissions was open access. Why aren't we there yet? The Budapest Open Access Initiative came out of a meeting in December 2001, and the declaration that's more widely known as the Budapest Open Access Initiative, the declaration was first published on the 14th of February 2002. So 20 years on from that, I think it is fair to ask the question, are we there yet, or why are we not there yet? There have been a few studies on how much actually is published open access. One of the more comprehensive was by the people who run Unpaywall. So they have a very large data set on open access publishing, and they found that only 27% of articles, this is a couple of years ago now, but only 27% of articles were available open access. And even then, most of those were what you would term gold, bronze or green open access, and not gold, not fully open access version of record from day one of publication. Some other data, last ERA submission, 2018, 32% of the journal articles submitted for ERA were found to be open access articles by the Australian Research Council. And perhaps the most telling of all is that over a quarter of articles about open access were published behind paywalls. And for library and information science researchers, it was actually even worse. Nearly 30% of articles about open access were not open access. So that gives you a bit of an idea of where you are. Now, I've worked in libraries for a very long time. I actually remember the Budapest Open Access Initiative and thinking, is this even an existential threat to libraries? Are we going to not have libraries because everything's open? If you cast your mind back to when you first heard about it, or if you're not as old and grey-bearded as me, then when you first heard about the ideas of open access, and I'd like to ask you, is this graph the sort of thing that you thought was going to happen in the industry? So number of articles published each year. I think this was a fair kind of expectation that a lot of us had. The number of articles published behind paywalls would reduce each year, and the amount of open access gold publishing would increase year on year, and that by this sort of time we would end up at this sort of place. You know, the lion's share. There were predictions that pointed to this kind of activity. So there's a very well-known article called The Inevitability of Open Access, written in 2012 in college and research libraries. David Lewis predicted that by 2020, as much as 90% of publications will be gold OA, or using slightly different modelling, 50% by 2021, but accelerating from there at a growing rate, that 94% of articles should be open by the year 2025. This is what we all expected, right? I can tell you the only thing that's accurate in this graph is the actual total number of articles, proportions completely made up by me, and this is what it actually looks like. This is data from Dimensions. All the articles published that Dimensions, a very large data set, has a record of from 2001 to 2021. And you can see basically we've added open access on top of traditional commercial publishing, which has in fact kept growing at quite a decent rate. And that's obviously reflected in the amount of money we all give to our commercial publishing partners year on year. The last graph before, we might have also expected, that was number of articles, but we might have expected the amount of money we spend on paywalled content to reduce as well. We're obviously definitely not there yet. So it is over 5 million articles published in 2021, but only 35% of those were gold open access. And the amount of closed access publishing increased from just under 1.5 million in 2001 to over 3 million in 2021. There's obviously a little bit of wiggle room here, whether some of the stuff which is not gold open access might be available green in repositories, or that some of the content that was published OA might not have been published if we only had commercial journals or paywalled content. So the distinction between them is not exactly hard and fast, but this is where we are. We have continued to grow and grow paywalled content, as well as all the work that's being done on open access publishing. So, a bit of an aside now, Marketing 101. This is the businessy bit. Hands up if you've heard of Philip Kotler. Everyone who works in a business library shelved Kotler's books 100 times a day. Philip Kotler, is that going to work? Philip Kotler wrote the book on marketing. That book was called Marketing Management, and in 1967 it looked like this. We're now up to whatever 19th or 20th edition of it, and has gone on from strength to strength. Philip Kotler has also, since then, written another 80 books and 150 journal articles. He's widely known as the father of modern marketing, and is perhaps most well known for the 4 Ps, the marketing mix, which is product, price, place, and promotion. Today we're just going to focus on one of these, which is the idea of a product. So what is a product? And Philip Kotler has given us a very useful framework or definition. His example in his first book in 1967 was a camera. There are levels of a product. Firstly, there's an actual product. That's the thing you would all recognize. That's the thing we generally talk about. That's the thing we would all acknowledge. You can point at it and say that's what it is. So for a camera, there is an air-filled assembly of metal or plastic parts surrounding a lens. In academic publishing, it's an article or a chapter or a book or a journal title. You know, publications, the clue's in the name. A publication is the actual product. We're all familiar with it. We deal with it day in, day out in our business. On top of the actual product, there's an augmented product. This is kind of the bells and whistles. So for a camera, the camera might come in a case with accessories, instructions, in attractive packaging with a trademark. Again, for academic publishing, for a library, we might value things like MARC records and counter-compliance statistics to go along with the product that we've purchased. Or for authors, they might want an intuitive article submission system, and that process is important to them. That's something that adds value over and above the actual product itself, the actual article. But neither of those two things is actually the most important part of Kotler's model. The main thing and where the action is what he calls the core product. And the core product is the problem that you're solving. It's the thing which is of benefit. It's the problem-solving benefit that the person wants, the reason why they buy the product. That's where the action is. So in the case of a camera, you don't just want an air-filled assembly of metal or plastic parts. That's not what excites me about having a camera. The camera, in Kotler's words, camera promises pleasure, nostalgia, a form of immortality. Might be a means of expressing artistic or craftsmanship instincts, can be a symbol of status and a means of relating to other people. So what does the camera do for you? That's the core product. And this is where I think we could have more interesting and more nuanced discussions about academic publishing and open access in particular, and probably why one of the main reasons we haven't made the progress that we could have up till now, because we thought we were talking about articles. We thought we were talking about books, but that's not what the product is. That's not the core product in publishing. And obviously the core product depends on who you ask. So we'll just run through quickly a few of the stakeholders at the risk of contradicting everything Stephen said about not just running through lists of stakeholders and trying to find the main ones. I'm going to give an overview of lots of stakeholders, and we'll talk about what they think the product is or what they get out of it. The main functions, there's a lot being said about what publishers do. Going back to the 17th century, people have said that publishers exist for 4 reasons: registration, certification, dissemination, and preservation. This is a very traditional thing that I think people who go to publisher school learn this sort of model or framework. There's a more detailed or nuanced version of it from Fisher in 2020, who talks about curation, filtration, curation, presentation, content marketing and title discovery, differentiation and celebration, and selling and distributing. As I say, I'm sure they learn it in publishing school, and the big 5 publishers, or commercial publishers especially, but publishers are the ones who have thought the most about this. Obviously, it's their bread and butter, and I think they're probably one step ahead of the rest of us in thinking about what the product is. We saw a bit from our session sponsors, AIP, about all the exciting things they do, and we can have a look. Here's little statements, the kind of tags or taglines or missions off the websites of the big 5 academic publishers. So you thought Elsevier were a publisher, didn't you? Elsevier are an information analytics business. They don't produce publications. They help institutions and professionals advance healthcare, open science, and improve performance for the benefit of humanity. Informer's products are events, digital services, and scholarly publishing, but they're here helping people learn more, know more, and do more. Spring and Nature advance discovery. They support the development of new ideas and accelerate solutions to the world's urgent challenges. Wiley also don't just publish articles, they unlock human potential and celebrate the seekers. How good is that? SAGE prepares citizens, policymakers, educators and researchers of the future. You can see these things are not saying we take submissions, edit articles and sell them to the rest of the world. These people are clued up about what they think they're here for, and the challenge, I think, for the rest of us is to get on board with this sort of thinking. So let's move on then. Researchers, obviously, people who have the most at stake in this conversation. An article itself is, less than 10% of the amount of time and effort and money that goes into the whole research or scholarly communications life cycle. But they have a lot at stake. There was a big survey of researchers, quite a large survey, and they asked people, this is the order of importance, what people hope to get out of publishing their articles or their works. So the main thing was the scientific kind of curiosity, contributing new information to the field and encouraging or participating in dialogue about an area of study. So that's the reason that the scientists, the researchers get out of bed in the morning. Then there are important things around establishing a formal record of scholarship, establishing a reputation in their field. This is because of the kind of publish or perish paradigm that we're all aware of. For researchers, an article can be promotion or tenure or their next grant application. So there's kind of, again, that's kind of core products for researchers. That said, the same people who are researchers are often consumers of information. So as an academic, there was another survey, why people read academic articles. And these were some of the reasons that they gave in that. So building a list of relevant literature, synthesizing and analyzing literature, following the work of specific authors or keeping up to date with the latest thinking. And that kind of helps guide people's research, but those people are often also teachers as well. The whole research teaching nexus that we have in universities. And so there's pedagogical reasons why academics want to consume articles, preparing for teaching, getting their students to engage with ideas or increase knowledge and getting them to develop higher order thinking skills. That leads us on to the students themselves. They're another group. For them, it's about building knowledge and understanding. This is a individual kind of building individual knowledge, whereas for the researchers it was about the whole field of knowledge, the science of it all, a collective effort. For the student, it's about building their own personal knowledge, their own storehouse of information, and then having that as an intellectual framework or a toolkit to tackle, both coursework and problems in the world of work and future things. For a student, the core product is success in their studies, their careers and life. Institutions are kind of an aggregate of researchers or students, so success for those other people is success for institutions, but they have other specific things like they want return on investment. They spend a lot of money on research. They use publications as research assessment tools. They're interested in reputation and rankings and attracting students, researchers, research grants and other revenue. So institutions have other things at stake. We could say these are the core product for an institution. With librarians, couldn't miss an opportunity to talk about the 5 laws of library science, but we could also ask how do libraries evaluate themselves? What do we think is important? You can see what we think is important by what we measure. So we talk about, we measure things like expenditure, so being good stewards for our institutions. But circulation and usage, that's really books are for use and every book its reader. That's why we measure usage. User satisfaction is ever read their book and save the time of the reader. So these things, that's how libraries measure themselves. I'd suggest that's a bit of a clue as to what we think is most important. And then finally, policymakers and funding organisations, they're obviously investing a lot into open access and open access publishing. For them, it's about, again, impact, return on investment and all those things, but there are higher, loftier or more, other moral goals or aspects to it. So Angus talked before about increasing bibliodiversity. We could talk about encouraging data literacy or democratising access to knowledge. These are all things from the French National Plan on Open Science. For a funding organisation like Wellcome Research, it's about basically their main philanthropic goals. Their aim is to improve health and save lives. That's what they're trying to achieve by funding research and producing publications. I could go on, but I won't, because we could talk about different types of libraries, about professional societies, state or national or public libraries, practitioners, policymakers, all sorts of other stakeholders. But the main thing, I hope you've got the idea, is that we can ask the question, what is each person, each party trying to get out of the whole process? Coming back to Lewis's overly optimistic predictions, they were based on the idea of disruptive innovation. So I think we haven't seen disruptive innovation yet because we haven't seen the kind of growth that was predicted in 2012. Kotler's product gives us an idea how that innovation might come about. So just as a thought experiment, if we disaggregated all the functions or activities that make up the scholarly communication system, look at each function or activity on its own and you could ask a number of questions of it. Like we have here, who derives value from this activity? And what value do they derive? Is someone willing to pay for that value to be realised? We've tended to try and get one party to underwrite the cost of the entire system, but can we look at a particular thing and say, this is a value to students, let's get them to chip in a little bit. This is a value to funding organisations so they can foot the bill for that part of the system. Can we carry out functions differently? And just to finish off, because I know we're close to time, here's a press release from the 1st of June from our session sponsors, AIP, who have added ebook content to CLOCKS. LOCKS stands for Lots of Copies Keep Stuff Safe. It's a good acronym. And CLOCKS is Controlled Lots of Copies Keep Stuff Safe. It's basically a centralised digital archive, and we at Victoria University are partners. We provide money to help fund the CLOCKS service. It's basically a centralised infrastructure, a shared infrastructure for preservation. And we saw before, preservation is one of the functions traditionally attributed to publishers. That's one of the things they say they do. It's also something libraries would traditionally say we do. But here's a way that we can look at it and say, does it make sense to have someone else do that particular function in an efficient way? And the people who gain the value out of it are willing to underwrite the cost of it and to pay for that part of the puzzle. We could do this same exercise with absolutely anything you care to mention. So discovery layers, distribution, peer review process, any particular part of the process you want to talk about, you could say, firstly, who gets the benefit from that, and are they willing to pay for it? So hopefully questions, challenges for everyone, and I better finish and let you all get to drinks. And
We've got a few Q&A, that's why we're stopping Graham a little bit early, because you guys have been fantastic. So whatever we can get done in like 2 minutes, we will, but we'll forward on to Graham so you can get your questions answered. So the first question is, what would be the top three considerations for working with green open access in an academic publishing?
Yeah, I mean, green is, one of the things, I think this is, one of the main things is that there's lots of different ways of doing things. There's no one right answer of how to achieve open access. And I think that's where this whole idea of disruptive innovation comes in. We have seen things like Archive, which basically is a preprint server, and they've thrown out the idea of version of record altogether and go straight to quick routes to publication for articles. There's plenty of room for that alongside people who do want a certified version of record. This is where I think some of the transparency in breaking things down into really small chunks and looking at each thing is a way that we can make progress, a way forward. All right,
we've probably got the last one. I want to thank Graham anyway for coming.
Thank you.
So there's your pin, and we'll try and get through this last question because I think the feed might be cutting out. I don't have the guide. So does the fact that academics are judged for promotions and grants by the weight and ranking of particular journals that are not open access, does that mean that OA will always have an uphill battle?
Yeah, again, that's one of the things. So we could say, we know that's important they're important things for researchers, being recognised as the person who came up with the new idea or did the research. So that recognition and the certification saying, I did this, we definitely could come up with other ways of doing that and say, okay, let's have a blockchain thing where you can register your research outcome in a central register, separate that from the process of reading, distributing the article. Can we just do the certification function in another way entirely that meets the needs of researchers? I think certainly we can. There's plenty of ways of doing that. And again, for institutions, it's important for them to measure research. But does that have to be done using traditional bibliometrics? No, it doesn't. That was invented by Eugene Garfield. He thought of a clever way to do it. We've all got a bit carried away. We could certainly go back, though, and think of other ways we don't have to use citations as the be-all and end-all to give people promotions and tenure. There's things like the San Francisco Declaration, SF DORA, which is about whether cleverer ways of measuring research, and that's the whole point, that it's all to play for. We can think of 101 new ways of doing absolutely anything. That's really the challenge, isn't it?
All right, again, thank you very much, Graham, for your time today.